So I've been speaking to a crowd of people joining demonstrations in solidarity with Palestine, and this is something that I'm really proud to see happening in Italy in particular. No matter the repression, no matter how much, the police is using repressive methods. I will go to it, but there is something that is happening because of Palestine that I call Palestine effect. So, but let's start with international law. Has international law failed Palestine? Is international law good for something or nothing? These are the questions that I'm most frequently asked. And I think that people who think that international law works as a magic wand are probably even they either they have unrealistic expectations on international law or they are naive. International law, like any law, is a tool and it's not different from other disciplines like medicine. Does medicine works? Yes, not automatically. When you have a disease, you need to follow a given therapy. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And the same thing, engineering, architecture, they are all disciplines that are offered to us as toolbox. And I do believe that international law is quite a precious toolbox in, for our global community because it sets the rules according to which we are supposed to behave in order to have peace and stability. This is the premise and promise of the UN Charter. And what has failed the Palestinians miserably is not international law, is the multilateral system as a whole, the way the United Nations has functioned up to date. But is it a real and sudden betrayal of the Palestinian people? I do not think so. I think that the United Nations have been part of the problem, and to an extent that the Palestinian people have, the question of Palestine was conceived as part of colonial era. The problem of the question of Palestine was created inside the colonial matrix that controlled the world until 80 years ago, 60, 70 years ago, 50, even 50 years ago. And the decolonization process is not over. So over time, international law as a system of rules, norms, and mechanisms to regulate the social contract that exists among states has evolved, has developed. And still, I do find in my study of the question of Palestine, in my research, in my publications, and even more after 3 painful years as a special rapporteur of the United Nations, I see that international law has not been applied to the Palestinians. Is it an exception? No, because many other people have suffered because of the way politics are determined and decided within the United Nations or by member states, regardless of the United Nations. And still, now here we are to talk about Palestine. When I lived in Palestine nearly 15 years ago, the applicable framework, the reference framework, was the law of occupation. The law of occupation imposing on Israel certain rules that Israel would systematically violate. And so my question was, but does this systematic violation of the rules of occupation make the occupier, the occupying power in conflict with international law? How come that we, United Nations, but also human rights organizations and others, continue to ask Israel to be more gentle in arresting the Palestinians according to military law, instead of repealing those military laws altogether? So there has been for a long time a friction between the goals of international law as it has developed and the application. And this is also the fault of lawyers like myself, who, in the pursuit of rigor, as I was telling in the last conference at Bethsaida, have become specialists of international humanitarian law, of occupation, of human rights, or other branches, international criminal law, forgetting to make these disciplines, these bodies of law interact, because it's in the interplay of the entire ecosystem that constitutes the international legal framework that you can grant full protection to the people. So it doesn't matter that it's an occupation, it is to respect and preserve and help realize the right of self-determination of the people. And an occupation cannot violate such a fundamental right, which is the pillar of all human rights. In fact, the right to self-determination is not just a human rights, is the basis for all human rights. Because if a people cannot exist as a people, how can they exercise their rights? To whom, if their right to self-determination is violated? Either in a form of an independent state, or also think of the Palestinians with Israeli citizenship. They could, to an extent, realize their right to self-determination by being recognized as a protected minority with full rights, plus protected as a minority, and we know that this is not the end game. However, through the months and now years of genocide, which I argue is not just in Gaza, it's against the Palestinians as such, and I will unpack it in a minute. I see that international law has somewhat speed up. Last year, the International Court of Justice confirmed what many, including myself, have argued for a long time. Israel's occupation in the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem is unlawful. I know that for the Palestinians, what people call in Israel proper is also a problem. But this is not for now. Be patient with me. The occupied Palestinian territory is illegally occupied. Israel must withdraw the troops, dismantle the settlement, stop exploiting Palestinian resources, offer compensation, and facilitate the return of the displaced. So the 1 million plus Palestinians who have been, many more now, probably 1.5 million people who have been displaced from Gaza, West Bank, and East Jerusalem post 1967. Now, the law is there, the ball is now high, the ball is now with member states who are obliged to comply with international law under the law of state responsibility. And if they don't do so, they can be held accountable. And this is why, for example, it's important what the state of Nicaragua has done in bringing Germany to the International Court of Justice for providing weapons to Israel, because Germany is the second largest provider. Germany and the United States provide altogether 95% of the weapons that Israel needs, although there is the complicity of many more. So here's the situation. Now there is also an international law which says there is the possibility of a genocide that must be prevented. This is since January 2024. And I have documented, I've written 4 reports on the genocide. One report analyzing the acts of genocide, the other report analyzing that it's a form of settler colonial genocide, aiming to erase the Palestinians from Palestine. The third, there are member states who are enabling it. Member states are providing political, military, diplomatic, and economic financial tools for Israel to maintain the occupation and commit the genocide. And this is why I call the genocide against the Palestinians a collective crime. And four, there is this genocide, like the occupation, would have not been possible without so many actors from universities, banks, pension funds, the military industries, and others profiting from it. What is the result of it so far? You want to know? The only concrete result that I am sanctioned by the United States. This is the result of my work. Other than that, I don't see member states moving really, honestly, in compliance with international law. Does it make me lose faith in international law? I say, look, it's not a matter of faith. International law is not God. International law is a tool. And I've reached a point in my life in which I do hope that member states will awaken and comply with the law as the last peaceful tool to make us, all of us, live together in Palestine and beyond. And this is the second part, and I will be quicker now on what I wanted to say. I know that Palestinians feel lonely and abandoned. And I mean, being so overexposed and now having my life somewhat tied to that of the Palestinian people, I do see why you might feel disheartened, and I do share it. At the same time, now more than ever, there is a hiatus between the people of the world and or a conscientious part of the people of the world and the governments. In Europe, governments are using repressive tools to shut down protest, to clamp down on freedom of expression, freedom of association. They are arresting journalists, suspending students, firing academics in Germany, in France, in the UK, in Italy, where I come from. Is it succeeding? No, not yet. It's 3 months that in Italy people get to the streets, block the ports. Not every day, but because people need also to work, and the people are poorer and poorer right now. This is why recently they're starting putting together their requests. There are people fighting for the environment, people fighting for the workers' rights, against the culture of weaponization or rearmament of states investing huge chunks of their budget on weapons rather than on health and education. And this is what I call the Palestine effect. Was it necessary to have a genocide? I wish I could say no. But look, this is not the first genocide that happens under our eyes. During my lifetime, nearly 1 million people in Rwanda were slaughtered under our eyes, under our watch, under the watch of the United Nations, which packed and left. In Srebrenica, 8,000 people were killed in less than a week under the watch of the United Nations. That was a safe area. This is why there were so many people from neighboring villages. So what I'm trying to say is not to distract you by saying, oh, other people have suffered the same. Of course not. But just to say that this is the first genocide that is causing mass awakening. Never before I've heard people reclaiming international law, calling international law in the street. Never before I've heard people getting an understanding, including in the part of the world I come from, where there is a colonial amnesia. And there would be much to say about that. But now people understand, and never before, they've worked, they have understood Palestine as for what it is, a settler colonial endeavor linked to European Orientalism, basically. And so there is awakening, there is connecting the dots. My report on the economy of occupation and the economy of genocide have not been generous, because it's true that it provoked many sanctions, but it has also helped what the Palestinian civil society, particularly the BDS movement for 20 years and others with them, have tried to say there is an economic, financial underpinning, backbone of the occupation, and everyone is linked to this. So this is why Palestine, and this is the third element, is so awakening, connecting the dots to our own struggles, right to work, the fact, for example, of Airbnb. Airbnb is profiting from the touristification of our cities, kicking out people from the city centers, making rents unaffordable. I say this is the same system that strangles the Palestinians. Amazon is the same entity which doesn't pay taxes anywhere, and now it's also and exploits workers and um, is providing deadly, in a way, technology that is used for deadly purposes to Israel, and so on and so forth. So the third element, after awakening, connecting the dots between us and you, is what Palestine has brought to us, and then there is the call for action. People know what the actions are. States have to sanction and cut ties with Israel. Businesses have to divest and citizens have to boycott. But citizens also have to bring the alleged criminals to justice. Yes, there is the ICC, but the ICC is under attack. The judges, the prosecutors of the ICC are all sanctioned, and I'm telling you, it's really difficult. Nothing compared to you in the West Bank, in East Jerusalem and Gaza. But for someone with my life, it's completely, I cannot book a hotel room. I'm kicked out basically from everywhere. I cannot even claim health insurance reimbursement because I'm considered like a terrorist simply for telling what happens to you. Doesn't matter. It's just to say people need to bring to justice everywhere those who have committed crimes, and not just the leaders, of course, the leaders, but also starting with the double nationals that work either that are there in occupied territory, either as settlers or as soldiers who have combated or who have fought this genocidal war. Voilà. This is what I wanted to share with you.